I'm a 30-year-old woman, and for most of my life, I was the quiet one in my family. Not shy exactly, I had friends, I held jobs, I lived a pretty normal life, but in family settings, I was always the one setting the table, helping with cleanup, keeping my voice low, while everyone else filled the room with noise. My sister Vivienne was the opposite, 2 years older than me and always the star. If there was a birthday party, she was the one making a speech. If someone brought up an achievement, she had a bigger one. If there was attention to be had, Vivienne would find a way to soak in all of it. Growing up, the gap between us was subtle but constant. She'd take my clothes without asking and return them stained or stretched. She'd present my school projects as group work if she thought the teacher would be impressed. I was the one who made detailed lists and helped decorate for our cousin's baby shower. She was the one who took photos next to the cake and got thanked for putting it all together. My parents always laughed it off. They'd say things like, Vivienne's just a bit much, but her heart's in the right place. Or don't take it so seriously, you know how your sister is. I studied graphic design in college, supported myself with freelance projects, and picked up a job at a local craft store to keep things steady. I wasn't flashy. I didn't throw parties or post curated photos online, but I worked hard and built a small client base on word of mouth alone. Vivienne, meanwhile, landed a job in corporate marketing before I even graduated. Within 2 years, she was managing teams, flying to conferences, and throwing themed brunches in her apartment that looked like something off a lifestyle blog. Our parents bragged about her promotions, her new car, the catered birthday parties she threw for their dog. Still, I didn't mind. She loved the spotlight. I didn't care for it. But then came the engagement party. Vivienne's best friend was getting engaged, and she wanted the whole thing to look Instagram-worthy. She called me one afternoon and asked if I could help her with some of the visual elements, signage, table pieces, small things, she said. When I asked about a budget, she laughed. Oh, come on. It's just for fun. And it'll be great for your portfolio. That's how she pitched it. A favor? Sure, but one that would get my name out there. So I said yes. For 2 weeks straight, I worked after shifts and into the night. I designed custom calligraphy for the welcome boards and drink menus. I hand-painted wooden signs for each table, matching the exact blush and sage color scheme Vivienne had picked. I made centerpiece jars wrapped in lace and ribbon. I even helped set up the event space the night before the party, staying until almost midnight to make sure everything was placed perfectly. When the party started, I stood in the background while guests complimented everything from the floral arrangements to the little favor tags. Vivienne smiled graciously at every compliment. She even gave a toast at the end, thanking her friend, the caterers, and the florist. My name didn't come up once, not even a quiet nod in my direction. Afterwards, she posted dozens of photos on social media, every corner I had touched, every detail I had crafted. The captions were full of emojis and so grateful messages, but nowhere was my work credited, not even a tag. Later, I brought it up, gently. I told her I felt overlooked. She laughed and said, "You know how this works. People don't care about the helpers, they just notice the person who pulls it all together." I didn't respond. I didn't fight. I just let the silence sit between us. When I told our parents about it, they barely reacted. My mother said, "You've never liked attention anyway. Don't let it bother you." My father didn't even look up from his paper. That's when I made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to offer help anymore. Not for free. Not when it meant spending weeks of effort just to be ignored again. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped volunteering. 2 months passed without much contact. I stayed busy with client work and started applying for a few local design grants. Then, out of nowhere, Vivienne reached out again. This time she needed help with a small project at her office, something for a quarterly presentation. She framed it as super casual and again dangled the phrase "great exposure." I didn't even reply. A day later, she followed up with a voice note. I deleted it without listening. Then came a text, "Are you seriously ignoring me over one party?" I blocked her number. That was 3 months ago. And now something's happened that's made my silence look like nothing in comparison. Something that finally made the rest of the family see her for who she really is. What she did next didn't just cross the line, it burned the whole bridge down. 2 months after the engagement party, I didn't hear a word from Vivienne. I had blocked her number, and I stayed quiet during family group messages. I figured she'd eventually move on or find someone else to take advantage of. But then, out of nowhere, she showed up at the craft store where I work part-time. She stood at the register, looking flustered and impatient. My coworker, who didn't recognize her, called me from the back and said someone was asking for me. I walked out and saw her standing there with her phone in one hand and a printed out list in the other. She said the planner for her coworker's baby shower had backed out last minute, and the event was this weekend. She had already promised her boss everything would be perfect, and she needed someone creative, like me, to make it happen. I told her I wasn't doing free work anymore. She said this wasn't about money, it was about family. She said she was asking just this one last time. I should have turned around and walked back into the stockroom. But she caught me in the middle of a shift in front of people. I didn't want a scene. So I said I'd think about it. And after my shift ended, I messaged her and said I'd only help if I was credited for my work, with my name and design page tagged wherever it appeared. She replied with a thumbs up and a "thank you, you're a lifesaver." The next 4 days were exhausting. I pulled together a full spring-themed baby shower setup on short notice. Paper flower walls, a custom backdrop with the baby's name in calligraphy, handmade centerpieces using soft pastels and tiny hanging mobiles, a matching set of game cards, activity stations, and signage. Vivienne arranged the venue and kept in touch with the mother-to-be's assistant, but all the visual elements came from me. Every last piece. The day of the event, I arrived early to set everything up. It took me 3 hours. Guests started arriving right as I finished the final touches. The space looked stunning. People kept walking in and immediately pulling out their phones to take pictures. The mother-to-be looked emotional when she saw the setup. I was packing up my supplies in the back when Vivienne handed me a small favor bag. I noticed the tag on it, a glossy sticker that read, "From Vivienne's Events." I stopped and asked what that was. She smiled and said she was testing out a business name, something she'd been thinking about for a while. I stood there holding the bag, realizing she had just branded my work again, this time under a name she invented overnight. She'd never said anything about starting an event company, not once. I didn't argue right there. I didn't want to ruin the event for anyone else. But when it ended, I asked her to clarify what was going on. She brushed it off and said we could talk about it later. And besides, we're sisters. What's mine is yours, right? I told her clearly that I wasn't okay with it and that she needed to fix it. I said if she was serious about launching a business, she had to credit the actual designer behind the event. She called me dramatic, said I was making it about me, said I should be grateful she included me at all. So I waited until I got home, and then I sent 2 polite messages. One to her coworker, just thanking her for having me and saying I hope she enjoyed the custom design work. Another to the event photographer, asking if they could please credit my design page when they posted the photos. I didn't insult Vivienne or drag her name. I just asked to be acknowledged. Vivienne must have found out within the hour. First came a string of emails from a new account. She had been blocked on my phone, but not on email, and it looked like she was trying every remaining way to reach me. The subject lines were things like "can't believe you did this" and "unreal." I didn't open them. Then my mother called me, saying Vivienne had told her I went behind her back and sabotaged her launch. My mother said I embarrassed the family by creating unnecessary tension over a few party decorations. She said Vivienne was finally doing something productive and I should be proud of her, not jealous. That call ended quickly. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain. I hung up and blocked my mother's number too. It's not permanently, but for now, I needed space to think. Vivienne never fixed the credit. The photos went up the next day under her new Instagram page, all tagged with Vivienne AS Events. I wasn't mentioned once. A few people even commented asking for vendor details, and she replied with "all done by me, DM for bookings." I felt like a ghost watching someone else use my hands. I didn't say anything further. I just saved screenshots, archived the work under my portfolio, and quietly added a clause to all future contracts requiring credit and watermarking. I didn't confront her again. I didn't try to make her see it my way. I'd contended and I been Laurel in my knee. But something shifted that week. I started seeing small signs, cousins messaging to ask if Vivienne really did the decor, old classmates following my design page out of nowhere. The next time someone asked me for a small favor, I said no without guilt. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a loss. Vivienne thought she had taken something from me, but all she really did was give me the reason to stop giving her anything at all. 2 weeks after the baby shower, everything went quiet. No texts, no emails, no family messages directed at me. Then, out of nowhere, I received a message through the contact form on my portfolio website. It was from someone claiming to be a wedding planner based in another city. They were asking for a quote on a floral backdrop and signage set, and referenced a design they'd seen under Vivienne's events. I replied and asked where they'd seen those designs. They said Vivienne had sent them a lookbook PDF. I asked if they could share it with me. Less than an hour later, I had it in my inbox. It was a 20-page document titled Vivienne's Events Portfolio Style Guide. Every single page was filled with images of my work, not just from the baby shower, but older projects too, things I'd posted years ago for other clients. The layouts had been edited to look uniform, and she'd changed the titles of each event to suit her branding, but the content was mine. She had either cropped or airbrushed out every logo and watermark I had placed on the original photos. A few of the files were clearly taken straight from my social media and lightly filtered to look slightly different. She hadn't just used 1 or 2 pictures. She had rebuilt her business image using my entire creative history. I sent her an email immediately. I didn't threaten or curse. I told her to remove the portfolio, stop distributing my work, and take down anything using my designs within 24 hours or I'd file a copyright violation. She responded in less than 10 minutes, calling me dramatic, territorial, and ungrateful. She said I should be happy that my work was finally being noticed and that she was getting us both exposure. I screenshotted everything: the lookbook, the email exchange, the references in the message from the wedding planner, and filed a takedown request through Instagram's reporting system. Her Vivienne's Events page was pulled down the following evening. That's when she exploded. She couldn't message me directly since she was still blocked, but she started a group chat with some of our cousins, aunts, and a couple of family friends. I wasn't in the chat, but one of my cousins sent me screenshots. Vivienne had written a long, dramatic post about how I was trying to ruin her first business and how I was making the family pick sides over something petty. She said I was jealous of her success, that I always played the victim. That I was trying to sabotage her because I never got attention growing up. I didn't react publicly, but I did respond to a few cousins who reached out to me directly. I sent them the screenshots and the side-by-side comparisons of the original designs with her edited versions. I also showed them a folder I'd created months ago, with timestamps and project files for everything I'd ever posted online. I didn't ask them to defend me. I just said, "This is what actually happened. You can decide for yourself." That was when the cracks started showing. A few cousins told me privately that they had always suspected Vivienne exaggerated her achievements. One of them remembered her saying she'd worked with a corporate client who, it turned out, was actually one of my freelance projects from years ago. Still, most of the family stayed quiet until my parents got involved. They invited everyone to dinner, the kind where they expect both daughters to settle things under the same roof. I didn't want to go, but a part of me felt like it was time to show the rest of the family exactly what I had been dealing with. I printed out a short timeline of events: the engagement party, the baby shower, the Instagram takedown, and attached side-by-side images showing how Vivienne had altered and rebranded my work. I included the email exchange, the screenshots from her lookbook, and a list of timestamps proving my ownership. I sat through the dinner quietly while Vivienne tried to tell everyone that it was all a misunderstanding. She said we'd work together and that I was misrepresenting her intentions. She cried when she talked about how hard she'd worked to launch her dream and how I was destroying it before it could even begin. No one said anything for a while. Then I pulled out the printed timeline and calmly went through it. I showed them how she had removed my name, how she had marketed my work as her own, how she had distributed stolen material to potential clients. My father, who had always tried to avoid conflict when it involved Vivienne, stepped in and said we needed to find common ground, that we should be building something together. I looked at him and said, we can't build anything together if one of us keeps stealing from the other. Vivienne stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out without a word. My mother followed her. My father just stared at the folder on the table. No one told me to stop when I stood up, collected my pages, and left. The next morning, I contacted a friend from college who works in trademark law. I had never thought I needed legal protection before, but I wasn't going to risk my work being used like that again. By the end of the week, I had started the process of registering my brand, my logo, and my design name as intellectual property. Vivienne had always acted like what I did wasn't real work. Now it was backed by law, and the next time she tried to steal it, she'd have more to deal with than just a blocked number. After my attorney filed the trademark paperwork for my design studio, I got confirmation within a few days that the application was being processed. There were no similar brand names on record, so there wouldn't be any delays. The timing couldn't have been better. I was working with a few small clients, prepping for a community art fair, and finally starting to feel like I had solid footing. 3 days after the confirmation email, Vivienne found another way to get to me. I received a long message through my business email, the only route she could still access since I had her blocked everywhere else. She wrote about how I had ruined her dream and publicly embarrassed her. She claimed that what I'd done had cost her partnerships and smeared her image in front of people who trusted her vision. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my attorney, labeled it under communications, and moved on. Within the same week, I started getting odd behavior from some of my cousins again. Short, vague texts, double meanings, and one even asking if I'd thought about reconciling before things go too far. Vivienne was clearly trying to rebuild her narrative through them. Then, she tried again. She launched a new Instagram page, this time under a different business name, since copyright takedowns are processed per account. I filed a fresh violation report for this new page. It was filled with altered versions of my past designs, the same calligraphy signs, the same style of backdrop layouts, but with slightly adjusted color schemes and overlays. Some photos were mirror flipped or cropped, but the structure and layout were identical to my archived originals. I submitted a copyright takedown request through Instagram again. This time, she pushed back and filed an appeal, claiming that she had co-created the pieces and was entitled to display them. I didn't respond directly. My attorney sent a cease and desist letter to her registered email and included the timeline of every job she had rebranded. The account disappeared within 3 days. No explanation, no statement, just gone. That weekend, we had a birthday celebration for one of our younger cousins. It was at my aunt's house, close-knit, casual, mostly extended family. I didn't know Vivienne would be there. She had kept her distance from any in-person events since the fallout started, but she showed up like nothing had happened, bringing a gift and hugging people like we were still 12 years old and fighting over board games. I kept my distance most of the evening. I was helping my aunt refill food trays in the kitchen when Vivienne walked in, cornered me near the fridge, and whispered, "You're being cruel. We're family. Family businesses don't need contracts." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said, if you wanted a family business, you should have treated me like a partner, not like your supplier. Then I walked out of the room. Later that night, I found out she had made a vague post on her personal profile, something about how some people would rather drag family through legal drama than share success. A few of our relatives had liked it. I didn't say anything publicly. I just printed a copy of the post and filed it away with the rest of the records. I was learning that silence made things easier to prove later. 1 week after that, I was invited to a vendor showcase at a downtown hotel, a small event for local businesses to present their work to potential clients. I arrived with my samples and display board, expecting a standard networking event. Vivienne was there. She wasn't listed on the program, but it turned out the event allowed late signups and didn't do much vetting, especially for smaller booths. She had managed to get a table at the far end of the ballroom. Her banner was different this time, but the designs on her presentation slideshow were not. She was using my older projects again, photos from the engagement party, the baby shower, and even the paper flower wall I had created last spring. I didn't speak to her. I took photos discreetly, her banner, her booth, the screen showing my work, and then I left without approaching her. The next morning, my attorney sent a notice to the hotel and the event organizer, attaching proof of copyright and timeline of ownership. Within 48 hours, Vivienne's name and listing were removed from the event's website. The organizer sent a brief message saying they had reviewed new information and would not be working with her moving forward. Vivienne didn't try to contact me after that, but the damage control had already started. One of my cousins told me she was now telling people I had threatened legal action over a slideshow, trying to paint me as someone unstable and petty. I didn't respond. I signed up for another vendor event the following month, this time with exclusive project samples under non-disclosure agreements. I also added a new clause to my client contracts, making it clear that all work must be credited and cannot be reused without written permission. Vivienne thought this was still about us being sisters, but she had made it about business the moment she started stealing. And now, for the first time, she was learning what it meant to lose control of the story. 2 months after the vendor event incident, the entire extended family planned a weekend trip to celebrate my uncle's retirement. They rented a large lake house 3 hours out of town. It was the kind of trip our family rarely organized anymore. All the cousins, aunts, uncles, even some older second cousins were invited. I wasn't sure about going at first. Vivienne's pattern was to act like nothing had happened, and the idea of being stuck in a house with her for a whole weekend didn't sound appealing. but my aunt called me directly and said I shouldn't miss out because of sibling stuff. She promised it would be peaceful. I agreed, but I made up my mind to stay neutral. I packed a book, my camera, and snacks for the road. I planned to stick with the cousins I still had a good connection with and avoid any one-on-one time with Vivienne. The first night was calm. Everyone arrived in waves. Dinner was a big potluck, followed by card games and music by the fire pit. Vivienne stayed on the opposite side of the room, laughing too loudly, overly cheerful, acting like everything was fine. A few cousins exchanged glances, but no one said anything. She handed out cocktails, complimented everyone's outfits, and clapped too hard at someone's joke. It was the kind of performance she gave when she wanted to control the mood of the room. The next afternoon was packed with typical family trip stuff: paddleboarding, board games, walks near the lake. That evening after dinner, someone suggested playing a family trivia game. One of our cousins had made custom cards with questions like who broke the deck chair in 2003, and which cousin once got grounded for sneaking out to a concert. Everyone joined in, sitting on cushions in the living room. The game was lighthearted until a question came up asking what family member brought the most creative dish to a past party. Someone joked about the green eggs from the baby shower. Vivienne jumped in and said, "Oh, that was mine. The pesto deviled eggs. I made those for Madison's baby shower." I looked up. Everyone did. I said, "Actually, I made those." I remember because I tested 3 versions before picking the smoked paprika. Vivienne didn't miss a beat. She smiled tightly and said, "You helped." The entire room went quiet. One of our younger cousins looked up and asked, "Wait, didn't you design that whole baby shower?" Another one nodded and added, "Yeah, didn't you hand paint all those signs too?" Vivienne laughed nervously and changed the subject immediately, asking what the next trivia question was. But the tension in the room didn't go away. Conversations slowed down. A few people looked between us, clearly piecing things together. Later that evening, while people roasted marshmallows near the fire pit, Vivienne found me near the back patio. She didn't even ease into it. She stepped in close and accused me of trying to humiliate her in front of the entire family. I told her, "I'm not humiliating you. I'm just not letting you rewrite history anymore." She froze for a second, then exploded. She yelled loud enough for everyone outside to hear. She called me jealous, said I was obsessed with credit, and had held a grudge for years over party decorations. People stopped talking. A few stood up. My aunt tried to calm her down, but by then Vivienne was crying and shouting over her. Then my uncle, the one we were all there to celebrate, stood up from his chair and looked directly at Vivienne. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You know what? Maybe it's time you stop using everyone else's work as your ladder." That was it. Vivienne turned red and stormed off into the house, slamming the sliding door shut behind her. The rest of us sat there in silence for a few moments. Then someone passed around the marshmallows again. The mood didn't fully recover, but no one blamed me. A couple of cousins came up to me quietly later that night. One of them said, "Sorry we didn't notice before." Another told me she had always wondered how Vivienne got her hands on such professional design pieces so quickly. I didn't say much in return. I didn't have to. That night, I packed up early and went to bed. The next morning, I left before breakfast. My aunt texted me later saying she hoped I knew I wasn't in the wrong and that the weekend just exposed what needed exposing. It was the first time anyone besides me had publicly called Vivienne out, and it hadn't come from me. That changed things. I could already feel it. There was a shift happening, small, but visible. And for once, I wasn't the one standing alone. A few weeks after the lake house trip, things stayed quiet. No texts, no calls, no new posts from Vivienne. For once, the group chat wasn't filled with her updates or event ideas. Then, one morning, a delivery guy rang my bell. He handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name handwritten on the front, not in Vivienne's handwriting. Inside was a formal letter signed by her fiancé. It started out politely. He wrote that they were planning a wedding in early fall and wanted to start fresh as a family. He said Vivienne had reflected on past misunderstandings and wanted to extend an olive branch by asking me to design the signage and welcome displays for their wedding. He included a short brief, a color palette, a mood board, and 3 image samples labeled for reference only. All 3 were screenshots taken directly from my website. I read the letter twice. There was no mention of what had happened over the last several months. No apology, no ownership, no acknowledgement of the designs she had stolen and passed off as hers. Just a request hidden behind vague promises of peace and a folder full of my own work being pitched back to me. I didn't respond right away. I wrote a professional message later that night. I thanked them for the offer and laid out my conditions clearly: a signed contract, full upfront payment, no revisions outside the scope of the agreement, and written credit on all design elements. I attached a breakdown of my service fees and licensing terms, just as I would with any new client. The next afternoon, I got a call from a private number. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again. I picked up. It was Vivienne. Her voice was soft, controlled, overly sweet. She thanked me for the proposal but said it wasn't in the spirit of reconciliation. She said she had hoped this would be a way for us to come back together, and my conditions made it feel like a transaction instead of a healing opportunity. I replied, "Then maybe reconciliation means leaving me alone," and ended the call. I blocked the number after that. 2 days later, my mother called. She said she heard about the call and the letter. She said I was making things harder than they need to be, and that Vivienne was finally trying to move forward. I asked if Vivienne had admitted to any of the things she did, not how it looked, but what actually happened. There was silence for a few seconds before my mother said, "Well, she regrets how it looked." That was the moment it became obvious this wasn't about making amends. It was about re-establishing control, about showing everyone that I had accepted my place again, that that nothing had really changed. A week later, the wedding invitation arrived. It was printed on heavy cardstock with gold foil edges. My name was on it, tucked inside with the RSVP card, and a little map of the vineyard they had rented for the weekend ceremony. I set it aside without opening the envelope further. I didn't say anything right away. Then my father texted me a few days later. He asked if I was seriously going to let a grudge ruin the family. I responded, if standing up for myself means ruining her narrative, then yes. I didn't go to the wedding. I spent that weekend at a design retreat I had signed up for a month earlier. It was a 3-day workshop focused on branding, hosted by a small but respected studio I'd admired for years. I met other designers, got feedback on my portfolio, and came home with 3 new client leads. It felt like the start of something different. A week after the wedding, I saw photos through a mutual friend's public profile. There were wide shots of the ceremony arch, the seating cards, and the dessert table signs. They looked like rushed copies of my work, similar fonts, half-done borders, badly cut lettering. One of the signs even had a spelling error in the couple's name. No one commented on the designs. The family group chat stayed quiet after that. No gushing posts, no endless praise, no long recaps from my mother or cousin. Just silence. For the first time, no one was scrambling to defend Vivienne or explain her behavior. No one was pushing me to move on or to let things go. It was as if the silence spoke louder than the arguments ever had. Vivienne had finally thrown a party where the spotlight didn't fix anything, where the cracks were visible even under candlelight and floral arrangements, where pretending didn't clean up the mess. And for the first time, nobody came rushing to fix it. After Vivienne's wedding passed without incident, everything went silent. Again, idol. There were no follow-up texts from my parents, no snide comments in the group chat, and nothing from Vivienne herself. For nearly 2 months, it was like she had disappeared from my life. The quiet was unusual, but not unwelcome. During that time, I focused on building up my studio. I had new clients from the branding workshop I'd attended, and one of them introduced me to a local wedding magazine editor. They were looking for new talent to feature and had heard about my custom event signage through a vendor contact. I agreed to an interview. It was the first time my name and my work were highlighted on their own, not attached to someone else's party or vision. The article appeared in their spring issue. It wasn't flashy or over the top, just a 2-page feature on my studio's approach to handmade event details, and a short quote about the importance of protecting original designs. I didn't name names. I didn't mention family. I kept it professional. Still, the message was clear to anyone who had followed what had happened the past year. About a week after the magazine was released, I got an email through my website from someone named Cora. She introduced herself as a former assistant who had briefly worked with Vivienne during her Vivienne's events launch. Cora said she had heard about my interview from a vendor they both used to work with. She said the article gave her the words for something she hadn't been able to explain at the time, why she left Vivienne's project after only a few weeks. She told me Vivienne had repeatedly blamed me for her business struggles, said I had blackballed her and made her look unreliable in the local planning scene. But Cora also said that wasn't what ruined Vivienne's chances. It was the meetings. She described how vendors started questioning Vivienne's sample boards, asking for live previews or past client contacts, and she couldn't provide anything that matched the quality she was claiming. Word spread. She lost 2 bookings before they even got to the contract stage. Cora thanked me for speaking up, even in vague terms, because it confirmed what she had sensed early on, that Vivienne had built her brand on work that wasn't hers and couldn't keep up once the pressure hit. A few days later, I got a call from my cousin Rachel. We hadn't talked in months, but she invited me to a small birthday dinner she was having at her apartment. She made a point of letting me know that Vivienne wasn't invited. I asked if she was sure, and she said yes, it was just a quiet dinner with a few people, and she wanted me to come relax without tension. I went. It was the first time in a year I'd been at a family-adjacent gathering without worrying about who would bring up what. No one mentioned the wedding. No one asked about the fallout. Instead, I caught up with cousins I hadn't seen since before everything unraveled. I helped light the birthday candles, took a few group photos, and laughed more than I had in months. Toward the end of the evening, my uncle, Rachel's father, came over with a cup of coffee and sat beside me. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "You handled everything with grace." Some of us just took too long to catch up. A few days later, I came home from a client meeting to find an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. It was heavy, sealed with a wax stamp. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter from Vivienne. She didn't ask for anything. There were no requests, no offers, no emotional bait. She finally admitted to taking credit for my work. She acknowledged how long she'd done it and how she had convinced herself it wasn't serious because I never made a fuss. She didn't try to justify it or soften it. She wrote that she had taken me for granted for years, not just my designs, but my silence. She said she understood that trust was gone, and she didn't expect forgiveness. She ended the letter by saying, "I just wanted you to know that I finally see it." I read it once, folded it back into the envelope, and put it away. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. For the first time in our history, she hadn't twisted the story to make herself look better. That was all I ever wanted, just for her to tell the truth without using it as a new angle. Since then, the family dynamic has shifted. Vivienne still shows up to things. She still talks to my parents. But it's different now. People don't automatically follow her lead. She doesn't plan events anymore. She doesn't speak over people. And no one asks her for ideas or suggestions the way they used to. When I walk into a room now, they don't look through me anymore. They see me. And I didn't have to scream, threaten, or make a scene to get there. All I had to do was stop letting her take things that weren't hers and trust that the truth would last longer than the performance.